Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Shadow Behind the Smile. Victor Vance had learned to read people during his 12 years as a homicide detective in Chicago. It was a skill that never left him, even after he'd resigned 3 years ago to start his private security consulting firm. So when his brother-in-law Doug Clark walked through the door that Christmas Eve with his picture-perfect family smile, Victor's instincts immediately flared. Something was off. "Victor, Merry Christmas." Doug's voice boomed across the living room of Victor's suburban home, his arm wrapped possessively around his wife, Sheila's waist. Behind them, 7-year-old Emma shuffled in quietly, her eyes downcast, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. Victor's wife Lydia rushed forward to embrace her younger sister. "Sheila, you made it. How was the drive from Michigan?" "Long," Sheila said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Victor noticed the makeup that didn't fully conceal a fading bruise on her cheekbone. "But we're here now." Doug was a successful pharmaceutical sales rep. At least that's what he told everyone. Tall, charismatic, with silver-streaked hair that made him look distinguished rather than old. He'd married Sheila 8 years ago, and from the outside, they seemed to have it all. The big house in Grand Rapids, the luxury cars, the country club membership. But Victor had seen too many perfect facades in his career. They always cracked eventually. "Emma, sweetheart." Lydia knelt down to her niece's level. "Come give Aunt Lydia a hug." The little girl's eyes darted to her father before she moved forward mechanically into Lydia's embrace. Victor watched Doug's jaw clench almost imperceptibly. "Where's she hiding those Christmas manners?" Doug said with a forced chuckle, moving toward his daughter. "Come here, princess. Give Daddy a hug." Emma froze. Her small body went rigid, and she stepped backward, positioning herself behind Lydia. "I don't want to," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The room went silent. Victor straightened from where he'd been leaning against the doorframe, his attention laser-focused now. Doug's face flushed red. "Emma, leave her alone, Doug," Sheila said quietly, reaching for her daughter. There was something in her tone, not defiance, but exhausted resignation. "She's tired from the drive. Don't give her attention for this behavior," Doug snapped, his charm evaporating like morning mist. "She needs to learn respect." Victor stepped forward, his 6'2" frame and broad shoulders filling the space. "Hey, Doug, how about I show you where you can put your bags? Guest room's upstairs." It wasn't a suggestion. Doug's eyes met Victor's, and for a moment, something dark flickered across the other man's face. Then the smile returned, plastic and hollow. "Sure thing, Vic, lead the way." As Victor led Doug upstairs, Lydia distracted Sheila with questions about their trip, while Emma remained silent, gripping her mother's hand like a lifeline. Later that evening, as Lydia prepared dinner, Victor retreated to his study to make a phone call. His old partner, Kurt Costa, still worked the detective beat in Chicago. "Vic, don't tell me you're calling to come back. You know Captain would take you in a heartbeat." "Not quite, Kirk. I need you to run a name for me." Quietly. "Who?" "Douglas William Clark. Lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Sales rep for Apex Pharmaceuticals." There was a pause. "This about family?" "Yeah. Give me an hour." Victor hung up and stood at his window, watching the snow begin to fall. In the backyard, he could see Emma through the glass door, standing alone near the decorated Christmas tree, her small frame silhouetted against the twinkling lights. She was tracing her finger along the window, drawing something. When Victor looked closer, his blood ran cold. She was writing "help" in the condensation over and over again. Chapter 2. The Confession. Dinner was a tense affair. Doug dominated the conversation, telling exaggerated stories about his sales achievements while Sheila pushed food around her plate. Emma barely ate, her eyes fixed on the table. "So, Victor," Doug said, cutting into his prime rib with aggressive precision. "Lydia tells me your little security business is doing well. Must be quite the step down from detective work, though, huh? Playing rent-a-cop for corporate executives?" Lydia's fork stopped midair. Victor felt her stiffen beside him. "It pays the bills," Victor said evenly, sipping his wine. "And I sleep better at night." "I bet you do." Doug said with a condescending smile. No more chasing bad guys, dealing with the scum of society. Must be nice. The scum of society aren't always who you'd expect, Victor replied, his eyes never leaving Doug's face. Sometimes they wear suits, smile at their neighbors, blend right in. Doug's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Doug, honey, Sheila interjected quickly, her voice shaking slightly. Maybe we should talk about something else? I'm just making conversation with my brother-in-law, Doug said, his tone hardening. Is that not allowed anymore? Emma dropped her fork. The clatter seemed deafening in the sudden silence. She mumbled an apology and slid from her chair. May I be excused? No, Doug said sharply. You've barely touched your food. I'll take her to pick out a Christmas movie, Lydia said, standing. Come on, sweetie. Doug opened his mouth to protest, but Victor cut in. Good idea. Sheila, you should help them. I'll handle the dishes. It was a dismissal, and Doug knew it. His jaw worked as Sheila quickly stood, relief washing over her features as she followed Lydia and Emma into the living room. Alone with Victor, Doug leaned back in his chair, his mask slipping further. You got something to say to me, Vic? Not yet, Victor said, beginning to clear the table. But I will. An hour later, Victor excused himself to retrieve presents from the garage. He'd barely opened the door when he felt a small presence behind him. Emma had followed him, silent as a ghost. He turned, and his heart broke. Tears streamed down her face, and her whole body trembled. Emma? Sweetheart, what's wrong? She looked back toward the house, terrified, then up at him. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet he had to kneel down to hear her. Uncle Victor. Actually, Daddy. She choked on the words, her breath coming in gasps. Daddy hurts me, and Mommy. He touches me in places that feel bad and says if I tell anyone, he'll kill Mommy and make me watch. The words hit Victor like a physical blow. His hands clenched into fists, and he had to force himself to breathe, to stay calm for this terrified child in front of him. He makes me do things, she continued, tears flowing freely now. Bad things. And he takes pictures. He says no one will believe me because he's too important. Uncle Victor, I'm scared. I'm so scared all the time. Victor pulled her into his arms, feeling her small body shake with sobs. Over her shoulder, through the garage window, he could see Doug standing at the kitchen window, watching them. When their eyes met, Doug smiled. Emma, listen to me, Victor said, pulling back to look at her. You're so brave for telling me. And I promise, he will never hurt you or your mother again. Do you understand? She nodded, wiping at her tears. I need you to do something for me. Can you be strong for just a little while longer? Another nod. Good girl. Now we're going to go back inside, and you're going to act normal. Can you do that? Yes. And Emma, you did the right thing. You're safe now. As they walked back into the house, Victor's phone buzzed. A text from Kirk, call me. Now, what you're looking into, it's worse than you think. Chapter 3, The Devils Resume. After Emma went to bed, Victor stood in his study, phone pressed to his ear, listening to Kirk's findings. Each word was another nail in Doug Clark's coffin. Douglas William Clark, age 43. On the surface, clean as a whistle. But I called in some favors with Michigan State Police. There's been an ongoing investigation. What kind? Child Exploitation Task Force. They've been building a case for 8 months. Doug's part of a network, producers and distributors of child sexual abuse material. They've identified him from digital forensics, but haven't moved yet because they're trying to map the whole operation. Victor's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles went white. Emma's his victim. Jesus, Vic, you're sure? She just told me. In detail. Kirk was silent for a moment. You need to call this in. Get her to safety. Let the system work. The system. Victor's laugh was bitter. Kirk, you and I both know how this goes. They'll interview her, traumatize her further, and Doug's expensive lawyers will drag it out for years. Sheila will be pressured to stay quiet. The trial will destroy what's left of that little girl's childhood. And even if he's convicted, he'll be out in 15 years, maybe less with good behavior. Vic, don't. I'm not going to do anything stupid, Victor lied. I'll make sure Emma's safe. Thanks for the information. He hung up before Kurt could protest further. Downstairs, he found Lydia cleaning up the kitchen. She looked at him, and whatever she saw in his expression made her freeze. "Vic, what happened?" He told her. Everything. By the end, Lydia was crying, her hand over her mouth. "Oh my God, that poor baby. Sheila, she must be terrified too." "She is. I saw the bruise on her face. He's been beating her, controlling her. Classic abuser pattern. We have to call the police. Child services." "We will," Victor said, though his mind was already working through a different plan. "But first, I need to talk to Sheila." Alone, he found his sister-in-law in the guest room, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. Doug was in the shower, the sound of water running through the pipes. "Sheila." She jumped, then relaxed when she saw it was Victor. "Is everything okay?" "Emma talked to me." The color drained from Sheila's face. Her hands began to shake. I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Victor closed the door behind him, speaking quietly. "How long have you known?" She broke then, tears spilling over. 6 months. I found pictures on his computer. I confronted him, and he beat me so badly I couldn't walk for 2 days. He said if I ever told anyone or tried to leave, he'd kill Emma in front of me, then kill me. He said he had friends in the police, that no one would believe me. "Why didn't you come to us?" "Because he watches everything. My phone, my emails, my car has a GPS tracker. He monitors who I talk to. The only reason we came here is because he wanted to maintain appearances." She gripped Victor's arm desperately. "Please, Victor. I know what you were. I know you dealt with people like him. Help us. The police will take forever, and he'll destroy evidence. He'll disappear. He has money hidden, offshore accounts, connections. Please." Victor looked at this broken woman, his wife's sister, and made a decision that would change everything. "Pack a bag for you and Emma. Small. Nothing obvious. Hide it in your car. Tomorrow morning, we're going to church. All of us. During the service, you and Emma are going to leave with Lydia. There's a women's shelter in the city, confidential location. They'll protect you while I handle Doug." "Handle him how?" Victor's expression went cold, and Sheila saw the homicide detective he used to be, the man who'd put away Chicago's worst monsters. "You don't want to know. Plausible deniability. But I need something from you first. Anything. His computer password, his phone code, access to everything." Sheila nodded, pulling out a small notebook from her purse. She'd been preparing for this moment, waiting for someone strong enough to help her. She handed Victor a page filled with passwords, account numbers, and detailed notes about Doug's schedule and habits. "There's more," she whispered. "He keeps a safe in our house. I managed to get it open once. There are hard drives inside. Videos. Pictures. Not just Emma. Other children." Victor felt rage so pure it nearly consumed him. But he channeled it, focused it. This wasn't about vengeance. This was about justice. "Good. After you're safe tomorrow, I'll need you to report everything to the police. But I need 48 hours first." "For what?" "To make sure Doug Clark never hurts another child again." The shower turned off. Sheila quickly wiped her tears, composing herself with the practiced ease of an abuse victim. Victor left the room, passing Doug in the hallway. They exchanged no words, but Doug's smug expression said everything. "You can't touch me." He had no idea who he was dealing with. In his study, Victor opened his laptop and began a plan. He'd spent years hunting predators. Now, he was about to become something far more dangerous. He pulled up the blueprints to Doug's house in Grand Rapids, which he'd obtained through his security consulting firm's database. He made calls to old contacts, not cops, but the other kind. People who operated in shadows. People who owed him favors. By 2 a.m., the framework was in place. Tomorrow, Emma and Sheila would be safe. And then, Douglas William Clark's carefully constructed life would burn to the ground. Victor had always believed in justice. But sometimes justice needed a helping hand. And sometimes that hand needed to get dirty. Chapter 4. The Shepherd and the Wolf. Christmas morning arrived with fresh snow and the smell of cinnamon rolls baking. To any outsider, the Vance household looked like a Norman Rockwell painting. But beneath the surface, everyone was playing a role. Doug sat in the living room, watching Emma open presents with the intensity of a predator. Victor noticed how Emma never showed genuine joy, how every smile was calculated to please her father, how she'd glance at him before reacting to any gift. "We should get ready for church," Lydia announced at 9 a.m. "Service starts at 10. Doug frowned. "We didn't bring church clothes." "It's Christmas. Come as you are," Victor said, leaving no room for argument. "It's tradition." At Mercy Presbyterian, they filed into a pew near the back. Victor had chosen this church specifically. He called ahead, spoke with Pastor Gene Shepard, a man he'd worked with on a community outreach program years ago. Gene knew what Victor had been, and more importantly, knew when not to ask questions. Halfway through the service, during a hymn, Lydia stood with Sheila and Emma. "Ladies' room," she whispered. They didn't come back. Doug didn't notice for another 10 minutes. When he did, his whole demeanor changed. The mask slipped completely. "Where the hell are they?" "Probably still in the bathroom," Victor said calmly. "You know how women are." But Doug was already standing, pushing past people in a pew. Victor followed at a measured pace, watching Doug check the bathrooms, the nursery, the parking lot. Sheila's car was gone. "Where are they?" Doug spun on Victor, his face purple with rage. "What did you do?" People were staring now. Victor remained calm, his voice low and controlled. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe they want to get coffee." Her phone's going to voicemail. "This was you." Doug grabbed Victor's shirt. "You turned her against me. That's parental kidnapping. I'll have the police." "The police?" Victor's smile was predatory. "By all means, Doug. Let's call them. I'm sure they'd love to hear about your concern for Emma's safety." Doug's hand dropped. His eyes darted around at the crowd gathering. He was smart enough to know he couldn't make a scene. Not here. He forced out a laugh, running a hand through his hair. "Sorry, everyone. Family stress. You know how it is." But as he walked past Victor toward the exit, he hissed, "This isn't over." "No." Victor agreed quietly. "It's just beginning." Back at the house, Doug was frantic. He tried calling Sheila repeatedly. He sent increasingly threatening texts that Victor made sure to screenshot. He even tried accessing tracking apps on his phone, only to find them mysteriously non-functional. "Looking for something?" Victor asked, walking into the living room where Doug was destroying the guest room, searching for clues. "Where did you send them?" "Somewhere you can't hurt them anymore." Doug laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You have no idea what you've done. Sheila's my wife. Emma's my daughter. You just committed a felony." "Have I?" Victor sat down, completely relaxed. "From where I'm sitting, your wife took your daughter and left. Happens every day. Maybe she finally got tired of the bruises. Or maybe she found out about your extracurricular activities." Doug went very still. "What are you talking about?" "The investigation, Doug. The Michigan State Police Task Force. The child exploitation network you're part of." Victor pulled out his phone, showing Doug a file. The one Kirk had sent him, complete with digital forensics reports and surveillance photos. "Did you really think you were untouchable?" The color drained from Doug's face. Then, quick as a snake, he moved. He was bigger than he looked, and clearly used to overpowering people. He swung at Victor, a wild haymaker. Victor caught his wrist mid-swing, twisted, and had Doug face down on the floor in less than 3 seconds. Years of police training, muscle memory. "Here's what's going to happen," Victor said, his knee on Doug's back. "You're going to leave my house. You're going to drive back to Grand Rapids. And you're going to wait." "For what?" "For everything you've built to collapse." Victor released him. Doug scrambled his feet, breathing hard. For the first time, Victor saw real fear in his eyes. "You think you can threaten me? I have lawyers. I have money. I have connections that would make you." "You have nothing," Victor interrupted. "You're a child rapist with delusions of power. And in about 48 hours, everyone you know is going to see exactly what you are." Doug grabbed his coat and bags, his hands shaking. At the door, he turned back. "I'll destroy you for this. You and your bitch wife. I'll make sure you never." "Doug." Victor's voice stopped him cold. "One more threat against my family, and I won't wait for the police. I'll handle you myself, and they'll never find your body. Am I clear?" The two men stared at each other. Doug saw something in Victor's eyes that made him take a step back. This wasn't a bluff. This was a promise. He left without another word. Victor waited until Doug's car disappeared down the street, then pulled out his phone. Kirk? He's on his way back to Grand Rapids. Tell your Michigan contacts to sit tight. They'll have everything they need by Wednesday. What are you planning, Vic? Something poetic. He hung up and dialed another number. Santiago? It's Victor Vance. Remember when I got your daughter back from those traffickers in Gary? Yeah, I need to call in that favor. Chapter 5. The Network Unravels. Victor's security consulting firm, Vanguard Solutions, had resources most people didn't know about. Legitimate on the surface, but with connections to a darker world. The kind of world that delved in information, leverage, and off-the-books operations. Santiago Mayo was one of those connections. A former NSA analyst who'd gone private. He could crack any system, trace any digital footprint. More importantly, he understood men like Doug Clark. I've got the passwords, Victor said, sitting in his office Monday morning while Lydia visited Emma and Sheila at the shelter. I need everything. His computer, his phone, his cloud storage. All of it. This is going to be ugly, isn't it? Santiago asked over the encrypted video call. Uglier than you can imagine. Can you do it remotely? If he's stupid enough to use the same passwords across devices? Absolutely. Give me 6 hours. While Santiago worked, Victor made another call. To Troy Curtis, an investigative journalist who'd won a Pulitzer for exposing a trafficking ring in Detroit. They'd worked together on a case 3 years ago. Victor Vance. I thought you retired to play security guard. I've got a story for you, Troy. One that'll make your Pulitzer look like a participation trophy. I'm listening. Victor laid it out. The network. Doug's involvement. The evidence he was about to obtain. But there's a condition. You sit on it until I give you the green light. 48 hours max. Why the wait? Because I'm not just exposing one predator. I'm burning down the whole operation. And I need time to make sure they can't run. Troy was quiet for a moment. You're playing a dangerous game. These people hurt children, Troy. Destroyed lives. The system moves too slow, and they've got lawyers who'll drag it out for years. By the time they're convicted, they'll have moved evidence, disappeared witnesses. I'm not letting that happen. What do you need from me? When I give you the evidence, I need it published everywhere. Front page. Every news outlet. Make it so loud and public that they can't suppress it. Can you do that? For a story like this? Hell yes. At 3 p.m., Santiago called back. Victor, you need to sit down for this. I'm sitting. I've cracked Doug's systems. You were right. He used the same passwords everywhere. And what I found, Santiago's voice wavered. There are hundreds of files, videos, pictures. Emma's in a lot of them, but there are at least 30 other children too. Victor's jaw clenched. Can you identify them? Some. There's metadata, locations, dates, and Victor. There are communications, emails to other members of the network. I've got names, addresses. This isn't just Doug. This is doctors, lawyers, a cop, a judge. These are powerful people. Send me everything. Every single file, every communication, every name. Already encrypted and uploading to your secure server. But Victor, be careful. These people have resources. If they find out you have this, let them find out. I want them scared. Victor hung up and opened his laptop. The files began downloading. He forced himself to stay clinical, to not look at the images themselves, but at the metadata, the network diagram Santiago had created. One name jumped out, Judge Lester Pineda, Michigan Circuit Court. He'd been the one communicating most frequently with Doug, discussing merchandise and new acquisitions. Another, Dr. Elmer Wright, a pediatrician in Grand Rapids. Access to vulnerable children. And there was more. A state legislator. 2 businessmen. A teacher. All connected through encrypted forums and cryptocurrency payments. Victor began building his strategy. He couldn't just expose Doug. That would send the others running. He needed to trap them all simultaneously. He called Kirk again. How fast can Michigan State Police move on multiple warrants? If they have solid evidence, 24 hours. Why? Because I'm about to hand them the biggest child exploitation case in state history. But I need coordination. Every suspect needs to be hit at the same time. Can you make that happen? Vic, You should hand this over now. If you're tampering with evidence, I'm not tampering, I'm organizing. Trust me, Kirk. One more day, and you'll have everything gift-wrapped. That night, Victor barely slept. He worked through the evidence with Santiago, building an airtight case file for each suspect. They traced cryptocurrency transactions, identified victims, compiled timelines. By Tuesday morning, they had a 400-page report that would destroy 23 lives. The guilty lives. But Victor wasn't satisfied with just legal consequences. These men had operated with impunity for years, hiding behind their wealth and status. They needed to understand what true fear felt like. He made one more call to Andre De Leon, an old friend from his military days before he'd become a cop. Andre ran a private military contracting firm, but he also handled specialized work. I need a team, Victor said. Surveillance and intimidation. Nothing illegal, yet. Just make sure certain people understand that someone's watching. How many targets? 23. Andre whistled. That's a big operation, Vic. What's the budget? Whatever it takes. I've got $200,000 in my security firm's discretionary fund. Use it. You're serious about this. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. By Tuesday afternoon, Andre's team was in position. Each member of the network found subtle signs that their world was closing in. A car following them. A stranger photographing them in public. Anonymous emails with simple messages. We know what you are. The psychological pressure was immediate. Several members of the network began frantically deleting files, making the kind of mistakes desperate people make. Mistakes that left digital trails Santiago could follow. They're panicking, Santiago reported. Judge Pineda just tried to wipe his hard drive. Dr. Wright withdrew $50,000 in cash. They know something's coming. Good, Victor said. Let them sweat. Wednesday morning, Victor met with Kirk and a contingent of Michigan State Police detectives in a secure location. He handed over the evidence files, watched their expressions change from skepticism to horror as they reviewed the material. Jesus Christ, one detective breathed. How did you get all this? Does it matter? Victor asked. It's admissible, legally obtained through passwords provided by one of the victim's guardians. The chain of custody is clean. The lead detective, a hard-faced woman named Clara Jensen, looked at Victor with new respect. You built our entire case for us. I did your job, Victor corrected. Now finish it. I want warrants executed simultaneously tomorrow at 6 a.m. Every suspect, every location. No warning, no chance to run. That's already the plan, Clara said. But I need to know, is there anything else you're planning? Because if you interfere with our arrests, I won't, Victor lied. I just want these people behind bars. What he didn't tell them was that justice wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. Chapter 6, The Public Execution. Thursday, 6 a.m. Victor sat in his office, police scanner crackling with encrypted chatter as raids began across Michigan. One by one, suspects were taken into custody. Doug Clark, Judge Pineda, Dr. Wright, all 23 members of the network. At 7 a.m., Troy Curtis published his story. It exploded across every news outlet in the country within an hour. The headline screamed, Michigan elite child predator ring exposed. Dozens arrested in multi-state operation. The article included everything. Names, photos, detailed accounts of the abuse. By noon, it was the top story on every network. Social media went ballistic, but Victor had one more piece to deploy. He'd held back certain files from the police, not evidence of the crimes themselves, but communications that showed the network's arrogance, their contempt for their victims, their belief that they were untouchable. Text messages where they joked about the children they'd abused. Emails discussing how to intimidate witnesses. Victor sent these files directly to the victims' families, to advocacy groups, to every major media outlet. He made sure the public didn't just know these men were criminals. They understood exactly how monstrous they were. The reaction was swift and brutal. Judge Pineda's house was surrounded by protesters within hours. Someone threw a brick through Dr. Wright's office window. Doug's pharmaceutical company issued a statement disavowing him, announcing an internal investigation. Their lawyers tried to control the narrative, but it was too late. The court of public opinion had already convicted them. Victor watched it unfold from his office, feeling no satisfaction, only a cold sense of completion. Emma was safe. Sheila was safe. The network was destroyed. But he wasn't done with Doug Clark. That afternoon, Victor visited the women's shelter where Lydia had brought Emma and Sheila. Emma ran to him when she saw him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. "Uncle Victor, I saw the news. Daddy's in jail. He is sweetheart, and he's going to stay there for a very long time." Sheila stood nearby, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past week. But there was something else in her eyes now, too. Hope. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I know what you did. The police said the evidence just appeared, but I know it was you. You saved us. You saved yourselves," Victor said. "You found the courage to trust me. That took more strength than anything I did." "What happens now?" Sheila asked. "Now you heal. You testify. You help put them away forever. And you and Emma start a new life." Emma tugged on Victor's sleeve. "Will Daddy ever get out?" Victor knelt down to her level, meeting her eyes. "Emma, your father is going to prison for the rest of his life. He will never hurt you again. Do you believe me?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face, but this time they were tears of relief. "I believe you, Uncle Victor." That evening, Victor received a call from an unlisted number. When he answered, a raspy voice spoke. "Mr. Vance? My name is Byron Holder. I'm the father of one of the children in those files. The police showed me the evidence against Doug Clark. My daughter was 7 when he hurt her." Victor's grip on the phone tightened. "I'm sorry. No child should ever." "I'm not calling for sympathy," Byron interrupted. "I'm calling because I heard through the grapevine how this all came together, how you orchestrated it, and I want to thank you. But I also want you to know that some of the other parents, we've been talking. We're not satisfied with just a trial." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Doug Clark and the others, they'll be in protective custody, isolated from general population because of what they are. They'll live comfortable lives in prison, 3 meals a day, books, TV, while our children live with nightmares forever." Victor understood what Byron wasn't saying. Justice will be served. Will it? Or will they hire expensive lawyers, draw out appeals for decades? You were a cop, Mr. Vance. You know how this works. These are rich, powerful men. The system protects them. "Not this time," Victor said quietly. "I promise you, not this time." After he hung up, Victor sat in the darkness of his study, thinking. The arrests were just the beginning. The trial would take years. And Byron was right. These men had resources to fight back. But Victor had something they didn't. Connections in places they'd never imagined. People who owed him favors. People who operated in the shadows of the prison system. He made a call to a number he'd sworn never to use again. When a gruff voice answered, Victor spoke 2 words. "I'm calling it in." "The favor from San Quentin?" the voice asked. "Yes, but this time it's not one person. It's 23. A pause. "That's a tall order, Vic. I help you get your brother out before his trial. Kept evidence from surfacing. I'm not asking for murder, just justice. The kind that happens when certain information reaches certain inmates. Information about what they did. Everything. Names, crimes, photos. I want it circulated through every prison in Michigan. General population. Let the inmates know exactly who these men are." Another pause. "That's a death sentence. You know that." "I know," Victor said, "and I'm fine with it. Consider done. But Vic, after this, we're even. No more favors. Deal." Victor hung up and poured himself a whiskey. He stood at the window, watching snow fall on his quiet suburban street, and wondered when exactly he'd crossed the line from law enforcement to executioner. Then he thought of Emma's face, the fear in her eyes, the way she'd flinched from her own father's touch. He drank the whiskey and felt nothing but resolve. Some monsters didn't deserve trials. They deserved extinction. Chapter 7. The Price of Justice. 3 weeks after the arrests, Doug Clark sat in the Wayne County Jail awaiting trial. His lawyers had arranged protective custody, keeping him isolated from general population. He had a cell to himself, access to books, and 3 meals a day. He thought he was safe. On a Tuesday morning, during his hour of recreation in the isolated yard, Doug found himself facing 3 corrections officers he'd never seen before. Large men with cold eyes. Mr. Clark, one said, "You're being transferred." Transferred? My lawyers didn't mention. Administrative decision. Come with us. They led him through corridors he didn't recognize, away from the protected wing. Doug's attorney instincts kicked in. I want to make a phone call. This is irregular. I have rights. The lead officer's hand clamped on his shoulder. You have a right to shut the fuck up. They brought him to a new cell block. The sounds were different here. Louder. More chaotic. General population. There's been a mistake, Doug said, panic rising in his voice. I'm supposed to be in protective custody. I'm a high-profile defendant. Yeah, we know exactly who you are, the officer said, unlocking a cell door. Everyone knows who you are now. He shoved Doug inside. The door clanged shut. In the cell next to him, an inmate pressed his face against the bars. Well, fresh meat. And looky here, boys, it's one of them kitty diddlers from the news. The cell block erupted in jeers and threats. Doug backed against the far wall, his expensive suit rumpled, his perfectly coiffed hair disheveled. Guards, he screamed. Guards, this is a violation of my rights. I'll have your badges. I'll sue everyone in this. A guard walked by, not even glancing at him. Maybe you should have thought about rights when you were raping 7-year-olds, Clark. That night, in the showers, Doug Clark learned what true fear felt like. For inmates, all serving life sentences for various violent crimes, surrounded him. They'd seen the news reports, read the stories, seen the photos of the children he'd hurt. One of them, a hulking man named Jesse Cobb, had a daughter the same age as Emma. What happened next? The official report would call an unfortunate incident. Doug's lawyers would scream about negligence and demand investigations. But security footage from that wing would mysteriously malfunction for exactly 18 minutes. When the guards finally discovered Doug, he was alive, but barely. Broken ribs, shattered jaw, ruptured kidney. He'd live, but he'd never be the same. And this was just the beginning. Victor learned about the incident from Kirk, who called him that evening. Jesus, Vic, someone shanked Doug Clark in county lockup. He's in critical condition. Is he going to survive? Yeah, but the doctors say the damage is extensive. He's going to need months of recovery before he can even stand trial. Victor said nothing. Vic, you wouldn't know anything about this, would you? Why would I know anything about what happens in county jail, Kirk? Because this has your fingerprints all over it. Doug was supposed to be in protective custody. Somehow he got transferred to General Pop. Somehow the guards didn't notice until it was almost too late. And somehow the security cameras went down at exactly the right time. Sounds like administrative incompetence, Victor said evenly. Happens all the time in underfunded facilities. Kirk was quiet for a long moment. I've known you for 15 years, Vic. You're not a vigilante. You believe in the system. I believe in the system, Victor corrected. Past tense. Then I saw what Doug Clark did to my niece. We did to 30 other children. And I realized the system moves too slow for monsters like him. So you took matters into your own hands. I made sure justice was served. However that needed to happen. Vic, if this comes back on you, it won't. I made sure of that. And Kirk, I sleep better at night, knowing Doug Clark is suffering. Does that make me a bad person? I think it makes you human, Kirk said quietly. But be careful. The line between justice and revenge is thinner than you think. After hanging up, Victor drove to the shelter to see Emma and Sheila. He found them in the common room, Emma coloring while Sheila read a book. Both looked more relaxed than he'd ever seen them. Uncle Victor, Emma ran to him. Look what I drew. It was a picture of a family, stick figures representing Emma, Sheila, Victor, and Lydia. They were all smiling, holding hands under a bright sun. It's beautiful, sweetie. Mommy says we're going to get our own apartment soon. And I'm going to start school again. I'm not scared anymore. Victor looked at Sheila, who nodded. The shelter helped me file for divorce and get a restraining order. With Doug in jail, I can finally breathe. We can finally live. What about the trial? Victor asked quietly, out of Emma's earshot. My lawyer says it might not even go to trial. With all the evidence, the prosecutors think Doug and the others will take plea deals. And if they don't, Sheila's voice hardened. Emma's therapist says she's strong enough to testify if needed. We both are. Victor felt something loosen in his chest. This was what he'd been fighting for. Not vengeance, but freedom for these two people to reclaim their lives. There's something you should know, he said. Doug was attacked in jail. He's alive, but badly hurt. Sheila's expression didn't change. Good. Emma looked up from her drawing. Is Daddy dead? The blunt question hung in the air. Victor knelt down to her level. No, Emma. But he can't hurt you anymore. Ever. I hope he hurts the way he hurt me, she said matter-of-factly, then went back to her coloring. Children, Victor thought, had a clearer sense of justice than most adults. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. 2 months later, the trial of the century began in Grand Rapids. All 23 members of the network were being tried together, an unprecedented legal spectacle. Doug Clark, still recovering from his injuries and walking with a cane, sat at the defense table looking like a ghost of his former self. The prosecution laid out their case with methodical precision, using the evidence Victor had provided. The courtroom filled with gasps and tears as details emerged. Several jurors openly wept. Victor attended every day of the trial, sitting in the back row where Doug could see him. Every time Doug looked his way, Victor held his gaze unflinching. A silent reminder, I did this to you, and I'd do it again. On day 4, a surprise witness took the stand. Byron Holder, father of one of the victims, had something to say. Your Honor, Byron said, his voice shaking with emotion. I want the court to know that my daughter tried to tell someone about the abuse 2 years ago. She told her teacher. The teacher reported it to Principal Margaret Hand, who then contacted Doug Clark directly to resolve the issue quietly. He threatened to sue the school. They backed down. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel. Order. That principal is here today, Byron continued, pointing to a woman in the gallery. She knew what was happening and did nothing. She's as guilty as these monsters. Margaret Hand tried to leave, but bailiffs blocked the exits. By the end of the day, she too was under investigation. The revelation opened floodgates. Other parents came forward with similar stories of institutional failure. A pediatrician who'd noticed signs of abuse but was pressured by Dr. Wright to stay quiet. A social worker who'd been intimidated by Judge Pineda into closing a case. The web of complicity was larger than anyone had imagined. On day 8, the defense made a surprise announcement. Doug Clark and 16 others were accepting plea deals in exchange for information about other predators in the network, including international connections. The courtroom erupted again. Victims' families screamed in protest. They're getting off easy, someone yelled. But the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Hannah Marr, explained that the plea deals meant life sentences without parole, and the information would lead to hundreds more arrests worldwide. Justice isn't always about the harshest punishment, she said in a press conference later. It's about protecting future victims. These men will die in prison, but the information they're providing will save countless children. Victor wasn't satisfied, but he understood the logic. Still, he made sure Doug's time in prison would be particularly unpleasant. The information about his crimes had already spread through the prison system like wildfire. Even in maximum security, even in protective custody, he'd never be safe. That evening, Victor received an encrypted email. No sender name, just a message. The first package has been delivered. The others are in progress. You were right. Some monsters don't deserve trials. Attached was a news article about Judge Lester Pineda. He'd been found dead in his cell that morning, an apparent suicide. But Victor knew better. So did the person who sent the email. He deleted it immediately, cleared his cache, and poured himself a drink. Lydia found him in the study an hour later. You saw the news about Pineda? I did. Good riddance, she said simply, sitting next to him. Is that wrong of me to say? No, Victor said. It's honest. She took his hand. I know what you did, Vic. I know you're the reason all of this came to light. I know you went further than just gathering evidence. Lydia, I don't need details. I don't want them. But I want you to know that I'm proud of you. You saved Emma. You saved Sheila. You probably saved dozens of other children by exposing this network. She squeezed his hand. Whatever else you did, whatever lines you crossed, You did it for the right reasons. Does that make it okay? I don't know, Lydia admitted. But I know that sometimes good people have to do bad things to stop worse people. And I know my husband is a good man. Victor pulled her close, and for the first time since Christmas Eve, he allowed himself to feel the weight of what he'd done. The lives he destroyed, the rules he'd broken, the blood on his hands, even if he hadn't spilled it directly. But then he thought of Emma's smile, her drawing of the happy family, the way she no longer flinched at shadows. And he knew he'd do it all again. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 6 months after the trial, Victor stood in front of a small house in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago. Sheila had used the settlement money from her divorce. Doug had been forced to liquidate everything to pay legal fees and restitution, to buy this place for her and Emma. It had a fenced yard, good schools nearby, and most importantly, it was far from Grand Rapids and all its memories. Emma ran out the front door, older now, her hair longer, her eyes brighter. Uncle Victor, Aunt Lydia, you're here. They'd brought housewarming gifts, plants, kitchen supplies, and a security system Victor had personally installed. He'd never take chances with their safety again. Inside, the house smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. Sheila had decorated carefully, creating a space that felt warm and safe. Photos on the wall showed her and Emma smiling. Genuine smiles, not the forced ones from before. How's the new job? Lydia asked Sheila as they sat in the living room. Good. Really good. I'm working at a nonprofit that helps domestic violence survivors. It feels meaningful, like I'm using what I went through to help others. And Emma's school, she loves it. She's made friends. Her therapist says she's making incredible progress. Sheila's eyes welled up. I never thought we'd get here, Vic. I really didn't. There were so many times I thought about. She trailed off, glancing at Emma, who was showing Lydia her room. But you didn't, Victor said firmly. You survived. You both did. Because of you. No, because you were strong enough to trust someone. That took courage I can't even imagine. Later, as the sun set, Victor found Emma in the backyard, sitting on a swing set. He sat on the swing next to her. Uncle Victor, can I ask you something? Anything, kiddo. Is Daddy really never getting out of prison? Never. I promise. She was quiet for a moment, swinging gently. My therapist says I should forgive him. That holding anger will hurt me. But I don't think I can forgive him. Is that bad? Victor thought carefully about his answer. Emma, forgiveness is a choice, not an obligation. You don't owe your father anything. If someday you decide to forgive him for your own peace, that's your choice. But if you never do, that's okay too. What matters is that you don't let what he did define who you become. What do you mean? I mean that you're not a victim, Emma. You're a survivor. You're smart, brave, and kind. Don't let his evil make you bitter or scared. Live your life fully, love people deeply, and be happy. That's the best revenge against people like him. She thought about this, then smiled. I like that. Being happy is revenge. The best kind. As they swung together in comfortable silence, Victor's phone buzzed. A news alert. Former Judge Lester Pineda found dead in prison. Second member of Predator Ring to die in custody. Victor deleted the notification without reading further. He knew what it meant. The network was being dismantled piece by piece, both legally and otherwise. Doug Clark was still alive, but Victor had heard through his contacts that life in maximum security was particularly hellish for him. Daily harassment, isolation, medical issues from his injuries that weren't being adequately treated. He'd lost everything. His wealth, his reputation, his freedom, his health. And still, Victor felt no satisfaction. Just a cold sense of completion. That night, back home, Victor and Lydia lay in bed together. She traced her fingers across his knuckles, which still bore faint scars from his confrontation with Doug. Do you regret it? She asked. Any of it? No, Victor said without hesitation. I sleep better knowing Emma is safe. That other children are safe. That's worth whatever price I had to pay. What about your soul? You used to believe in the law and the system. I still believe in justice. I just learned that sometimes the law and justice aren't the same thing. Lydia was quiet for a moment. Kirk called me today. He said the Michigan State Police want to hire you as a consultant. Help them investigate other predator networks. What did you tell him? That I'd talk to you. We don't do it. Victor considered. He'd left law enforcement to escape the darkness, to find peace. But he'd learned something over the past 6 months. Some people were built to fight monsters. And running from that truth didn't make the monsters disappear. Yeah, he said finally. I think I would. Someone has to protect the kids who can't protect themselves. My hero, Lydia said, kissing him softly. Victor smiled, but in his mind, he wasn't a hero. Heroes worked within the system. They played by the rules. They believed in redemption. He believed in protection, in justice, in making sure that people who hurt children face consequences, in this life or the next. The notification on his phone buzzed again. Another member of the network dead in prison. The message was clear. The monsters were being hunted. And Victor Vance was fine with that. Epilogue, 3 years later. Emma Clark, now 10 years old, stood on stage at her elementary school's talent show. She'd chosen to sing, something she never would have had the courage to do before. In the audience, Sheila sat with Victor and Lydia, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter shine. Doug Clark's name had faded from the news cycle. He was serving 6 consecutive life sentences in a maximum security facility, one of the few original network members still alive. His health was failing, his spirit broken. The man who'd once thought himself untouchable now spent 23 hours a day in a cell, the other hour in an isolated yard under heavy guard. The network he'd been part of had been completely dismantled. Santiago's evidence had led to over 300 arrests across 4 countries. Thousands of children had been saved, and Emma Clark was singing. As her clear voice filled the auditorium, Victor thought about the night she'd whispered her terrible secret to him. How close they'd come to losing her. How many other children had been lost before someone stopped the monsters. He'd crossed lines, broken laws, arranged for violence, become something darker than he'd ever intended. But looking at Emma now, healthy and happy and whole, he knew he'd do it all again. Some battles couldn't be won with rules. Some monsters deserved to burn. And some heroes had to be willing to walk through hell to save the innocent. Victor Vance had made his choice, and he'd live with it, without regret, for the rest of his life. Because in the end, justice wasn't about the law. It was about making sure little girls could sing without fear. And that was worth everything. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Perfect Life. Matt Allen stood in his corner office on the 42nd floor, gazing out at the Seattle skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. At 52, he had built an empire from nothing, a real estate development company that had transformed the city's waterfront. His calloused hands, still bearing traces of his construction worker past, now signed contracts worth millions. 25 years ago, he'd been swinging hammers and pouring concrete to put himself through night school. That's where he met Paulette Tate, a stunning blonde studying interior design. She was everything he wasn't, refined, educated from a family with old money. Her father, Wesley Massey, owned a chain of upscale furniture stores and made no secret of his disdain for the blue-collar nobody his daughter had chosen. But Matt's ambition burned hotter than their disapproval. He worked 18-hour days, saved every penny, and slowly climbed from contractor to developer. Paulette seemed to love his drive then, often bragging to her friends about her self-made man. They married after he landed his first major project, and she gave him 2 children, Lori, now 28, and Derek, 25. The irony wasn't lost on Matt that his son shared a name with the man who would later destroy their family. For years, their marriage appeared perfect from the outside. Paulette decorated their sprawling Bellevue mansion with impeccable taste, hosted charity galas, and played the role of successful businessman's wife flawlessly. But Matt had always sensed something hollow beneath her polished exterior. a coldness that emerged whenever she thought no one was watching. Recently, that coldness had intensified. Paulette spent more time shopping with friends or attending book club meetings that seemed to run late into the evening. She'd started working out with a personal trainer 3 times a week, something she'd never shown interest in before. Her phone was now constantly face down, and she'd developed a habit of taking calls in the other room. Matt wasn't a fool. He'd built his fortune by reading people, by sensing when something was off. The signs were all there, but a part of him, the part that still remembered the young man who thought he wasn't good enough for her, didn't want to see them. That evening, as he sat in his study reviewing contracts, Paulette breezed in wearing a new dress he'd never seen before. "Don't wait up tonight," she said, not bothering to look at him. "Christy Patel is having relationship troubles, and us girls are taking her out to cheer her up." Matt glanced up from his papers. Christy Patel. He knew that name. She worked at some boutique fitness studio downtown, one of those trendy places that charged $200 for a session. He'd never liked her. Something about her struck him as calculating, manipulative. "Which restaurant?" he asked casually. "Oh, that new place in Belltown. I can never remember the name." She was already heading for the door. Kiss, kiss. After she left, Matt sat in the growing darkness of his study, a cold certainty settling in his chest. There was no new restaurant in Belltown. He would know. His company had developed half that neighborhood. For 25 years, he'd given her everything. A lifestyle most people could only dream of: social status, financial security. He'd overlooked her subtle put-downs about his background, her embarrassment when his old construction buddies visited, her way of introducing him to her friends as if he were some amusing pet project she'd civilized. But if she was cheating, if she was making a fool of him while living off his success, that was a betrayal he could never forgive. Matt Allen had learned long ago that trust, once broken, could never be repaired. In business, a handshake meant everything. A man's word was his bond. Those who violated that sacred trust found themselves frozen out, their reputations destroyed, their futures ruined. He applied the same ruthless standard to every relationship in his life. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to Colin Watson's number. Colin was an old friend from his construction days who now ran a private investigation firm. If Paulette was cheating, Matt needed to know everything: who, where, when, and for how long. Because once he had that information, he would begin planning her destruction with the same meticulous attention to detail he brought to every project. Some men might forgive. Some might try to work things out. Matt Allen was not some men. Chapter 2. The Truth Unveiled. Colin Watson's report arrived 3 weeks later in a thick manila envelope. Matt waited until Paulette left for her yoga class before opening it in his study. What he found inside made his blood run cold. Not from heartbreak, but from rage. The photographs told the story in vivid detail. Paulette entering the downtown apartment building where Derek Reeves lived. Derek Reeves, 35, personal trainer and part-time model, with the kind of sculpted physique that attracted bored housewives seeking excitement. The same Derek Reeves who trained several women from their social circle, including Christy Patel. More photos showed them at restaurants Matt had never heard of, in neighborhoods where he and Paulette never went. Derek's hands on her waist, her fingers intertwined with his, intimate moments captured through telephoto lenses. The timestamps showed this had been going on for 8 months. 8 months of lies. 8 months of book clubs and girls' nights and yoga classes. Colin's investigation had dug deeper. Derek Reeves wasn't just some random fitness instructor. He was a con artist with a pattern. 3 previous affairs with wealthy married women, each relationship ending when the women started talking about leaving their husbands. Derek would disappear, moving to a new city, finding new prey. But this time was different. The photos showed Paulette giving Derek envelopes, cash, according to Colin's notes. She was funding his lifestyle, paying his rent, buying him clothes and gym equipment. Matt's money, earned through years of 18-hour days and calculated risks, was being handed over to a man who saw his wife as nothing more than an ATM with benefits. The final page of the report contained the most damning evidence: a lease agreement for a condo in Scottsdale, Arizona. Derek had signed it 2 months ago, listing Paulette as a co-signer. They were planning to run away together. Matt set the report aside and poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff he saved for closing major deals. But this wasn't a celebration. This was the end of everything he'd thought his life was. His phone buzzed. A text from Lori. "Dad, are you free this weekend? Derek and I have some news to share." Derek, his son, named after the very man who was now destroying their family. Matt had named him after Derek Jeter, but the irony felt like a knife twist. Lori's Derek was Derek Reeves, her boyfriend of 2 years, the man she was clearly planning to marry if her excited tone was any indication. Matt's mind began working with mechanical precision. Paulette didn't know he knew. She was planning to blindside him, probably waiting until after Lori's wedding to make her move. She'd take half of everything in the divorce, claim she was the wrong party, paint him as the workaholic husband who drove her into another man's arms. The old Matt, the one who'd grown up poor and grateful, might have let her have it, might have walked away quietly to avoid embarrassing their children. But Matt Allen hadn't built an empire by accepting defeat. He'd done it by outthinking, outmaneuvering, and utterly destroying his competition. Paulette wanted to play games? He'd show her how a real player operated. He pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. First, he needed to secure his assets. His lawyer, Paul Cross, was discreet and ruthless, the kind of man who understood that sometimes the law was just the starting point for justice. Second, he needed to document everything. If Paulette thought she could claim half his fortune built before she ever contributed a meaningful thing to his success, she was about to learn otherwise. Third, he needed to understand Derek Reeves. Every man had weaknesses, pressure points that could be exploited. Colin's report was just the beginning. As Matt planned, his phone rang. Paulette's voice was bright and cheerful. "Hi, honey. Running late again tonight. Christy's going through a really rough patch." "Of course," Matt replied, his voice steady. "Take all the time you need." After hanging up, he smiled for the first time in weeks. Not the warm smile he'd once reserved for his wife, but something colder, sharper. The smile of a predator who'd just spotted his prey. Paulette thought she was playing him for a fool. She had no idea she was about to learn the difference between a man who'd inherited his position and one who'd fought for every inch of it. The game was about to begin, and Matt Allen had never lost a game that mattered. Chapter 3. The Foundation Crumbles. 6 months later, Matt had assembled all the pieces of his strategy. The divorce papers were filed quietly, sealed by a judge who owed Matt several favors from city planning hearings. Paulette wouldn't know until the moment was right. His assets were now bulletproof. Shell companies, offshore accounts, and trust funds had made his wealth virtually untouchable. His lawyer Paul Cross had worked miracles, creating a financial fortress that would leave Paulette with exactly what she'd brought to the marriage. Nothing. But the money was just the beginning. Matt had spent those months becoming Derek Reeves' shadow. He knew the man's routines, his weaknesses, his debts. Derek owed money to some very unpleasant people, gambling debts from his previous life in Las Vegas that he'd never fully paid off. Those creditors were now actively looking for him, thanks to an anonymous tip about his current location. More importantly, Matt had discovered Derek's relationship with Christy Patel wasn't just friendship. She was his partner in a long-running scheme, helping him identify and target wealthy women. They'd done this in 3 other cities, always moving on before the heat got too intense. But Christy had made a mistake. She'd fallen for Derek herself, becoming jealous of his relationship with Paulette. The recordings Matt had obtained through Colin's surveillance captured her threatening to expose Derek unless he chose her instead. It was beautiful, really. They were going to destroy each other, and Matt would just provide the final push. The opportunity came during dinner at the country club. Paulette was radiant, practically glowing with what she thought was her secret. Lori and her Derek, the good Derek Coleman, had just announced their engagement. "This calls for a celebration," Matt said, raising his champagne glass. "To new beginnings." Paulette smiled at him, probably thinking about her own new beginning in Arizona. If only she knew. After dinner, as they drove home in Matt's Tesla, Paulette finally made her move. "Matt, we need to talk," she said, her voice taking on that serious tone she used for important announcements. "About what?" About us. About our marriage. She paused dramatically. I think we should consider taking some time apart. Matt pulled into their driveway and turned off the engine. In the darkness of the garage, he could barely see her face. Time apart, he repeated. You mean a separation? Yes. I think we've grown apart. We want different things now. Matt nodded slowly. You're right. We do want different things. He turned to look at her directly. You want Derek Reeves. I want my wife to have some integrity. The color drained from Paulette's face. I don't know what you're talking about. 8 months, Paulette. 8 months of lies. Matt's voice was calm, almost conversational. The condo in Scottsdale. The cash payments. The whole elaborate fantasy you've built with your boy toy. She started to stammer a denial, but Matt held up his hand. Don't. We're past the point of lies now. He pulled out his phone and showed her one of Colin's photographs. Her and Derek in an intimate embrace outside his apartment building. You want a divorce? You'll get one, but you won't get a penny. That's not how community property works, Matt. Half of everything is mine. Matt smiled that cold smile she was finally starting to recognize. Is it? Because according to my records, you haven't contributed to this marriage's success. You've been a drain on it. A very expensive, unfaithful drain. You can't prove. I can prove everything. He scrolled through more photos on his phone. Every lie, every betrayal, every dollar you stole from our account to fund your affair. But here's the real beauty of it, Paulette. I don't have to prove anything in court. She stared at him, confusion replacing defiance. You see, I know about Derek's gambling debts. I know about his arrangement with Christy Patel. I know about the other women in other cities. Matt put his phone away and opened the car door. And tomorrow, everyone else will know too. What are you talking about? Matt stepped out of the car, then leaned down to look at her one last time. You wanted to play games, Paulette. You wanted to treat our marriage like some kind of business transaction where you could just walk away with half the profits after doing none of the work. His voice dropped to a whisper. Now you get to learn what happens when you try to con a real businessman. He walked into the house, leaving her sitting in the dark garage. Behind him, he could hear her fumbling with her phone, probably calling Derek. Let her warn him. It wouldn't matter. The trap was already closing, and there was nowhere left to run. Chapter 4. The Perfect Storm. Derek Reeves was having the worst week of his life, and it was only Wednesday. It started Monday morning when 2 large men in expensive suits showed up at his apartment building, asking the doorman about his whereabouts. The doorman, who Derek had always tipped well, gave him a heads up. They looked like the kind of men who collected debts with interest. Tuesday brought worse news. Christy Patel had called him in hysterics. Someone had sent photos to her ex-husband, photos of her and Derek together, along with detailed financial records showing how much money she'd given him over the past year. Her divorce settlement was now in jeopardy, and she was threatening to drag Derek down with her. Wednesday morning, Derek woke to find his car missing from the gym parking lot. Not stolen, repossessed. The financing company claimed he defaulted on payments, which was impossible since Paulette had been covering those. When he called her, her voice was strained, almost panicked. We need to meet, she said. Somewhere private. Matt knows everything. They met at a coffee shop in Fremont, far from their usual haunts. Paulette looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past week. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore no makeup. He has photographs, she whispered across the small table. Timestamps, bank records, everything. He's going to destroy me in the divorce. Derek felt his stomach clench. What about the plan? What about Scottsdale? What about it? He knows about the condo, too. Paulette's voice cracked. Derek, I think he's been planning this for months. Maybe longer. Derek's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check your email. The email contained a single attachment, a video file. Derek opened it with trembling fingers and felt his world collapse. It was security footage from his apartment building, showing him with 3 different women over the past 6 months. Not just Paulette, but Sharon Padilla, whose husband owned a tech startup, and Violet Rowland, wife of a prominent surgeon. The timestamp showed dates when he'd told each woman he was exclusive with them. Jesus Christ, Derek breathed. What is it? He showed her the video, watching her face crumble as she realized what it meant. He's got everything, Derek said. Every lie, His phone rang. The caller ID showed Colin Watson Investigations. Mr. Reeves, Colin's voice was professional, almost friendly. I think we should talk. Who is this? A friend of Matt Allen's. And potentially yours, if you're smart. Derek's mind raced. What do you want? To offer you a choice. You can wait for this information to become public, and trust me, it will. Or you can get ahead of it. I don't understand. Meet me at Pike Place Market, 1 hour. Come alone, and bring your passport. The line went dead. Derek stared at his phone, then at Paulette's expectant face. I have to go. Derek, wait. But he was already walking away, his mind spinning with possibilities. Maybe this was his chance to salvage something from the wreckage. Maybe if he cooperated, he could minimize the damage. He had no idea he was walking straight into the final phase of Matt Allen's trap. An hour later, Derek found Colin Watson at a seafood stand overlooking Elliott Bay. Colin was a thick-set man with gray hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Reeves, thank you for coming. What do you want? Colin handed him a manila envelope. Your exit strategy. Derek opened it to find a plane ticket to Las Vegas, dated for that evening, along with a cashier's check for $50,000. What's the catch? No catch. Matt Allen is a businessman, not a sadist. He wants you gone, not destroyed. Take the money, get on the plane, and disappear. Start over somewhere else. Derek stared at the ticket. And if I don't? Colin's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Then tomorrow morning, every woman you've scammed gets a copy of that video, along with evidence of every dollar you've taken from them. Your gambling creditors get your current address, and the IRS gets detailed records of your unreported income. You can't. We already have. Colin pointed to the envelope. That's your choice, Mr. Reeves. Take Matt's generous offer and walk away clean, or stay and face the consequences of trying to con a man who's forgotten more about revenge than you'll ever know about anything. Derek looked out at the gray waters of Puget Sound, then back at the ticket in his hands. What about Paulette? What about her? She made her choice when she decided to betray her husband. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Colin turned to walk away, then paused. One more thing, Mr. Reeves. That ticket expires at midnight. Miss the flight, and the offer expires with it. Derek watched the older man disappear in the crowd, clutching the envelope that represented his only chance at escape. Behind him, his phone buzzed with another text from Paulette, begging him to call her. But Derek Reeves was already planning his route to the airport. Chapter 5. The Wedding Day. Lori Allen Coleman's wedding day dawned gray and drizzly, typical Seattle weather that couldn't dampen her radiant happiness. The ceremony was set for 2 o'clock at the historic Fairmont Olympic Hotel, with a reception to follow in the Spanish ballroom. Matt stood in his suite, adjusting his platinum cufflinks, a gift from Paulette on their 10th anniversary, back when she still pretended to love him. Today, they felt appropriate, a reminder of what he was leaving behind. The past month had been a masterpiece of calculated destruction. Derek Reeves had taken the money and fled to Las Vegas, but not before Matt had ensured the man's reputation was thoroughly demolished. Every woman Derek had scammed received detailed evidence of his schemes. His gambling creditors found him within days of his arrival in Vegas. The last Colin heard, Derek was working as a night janitor at a casino, all his confidence and swagger reduced to quiet desperation. Paulette, meanwhile, was discovering what it meant to be truly alone. Her father, Wesley Massey, had cut her off after learning about the affair. Apparently, old money families still cared about maintaining appearances. Her society friends had distanced themselves once word spread about her embarrassing situation. Even Christy Patel had turned on her, blaming Paulette for ruining her own divorce settlement. But today wasn't about Paulette or Derek. Today was about Lori, his beautiful daughter who still believed in love and family and all the things Matt had once held sacred. Matt straightened his tie and headed downstairs to meet the wedding party. The hotel lobby was a controlled chaos of flowers, photographers, and excited relatives. Matt spotted his son Derek, the good Derek Coleman, directing traffic with the efficiency of the naval officer he'd once been. Colin Watson stood near the concierge desk, looking like any other wedding guest but keeping careful watch. "Dad, Lori appeared at his elbow, resplendent in her grandmother's vintage lace dress. "You look handsome." "Not as beautiful as you," Matt replied, meaning every word. Of all the relationships damaged by Paulette's betrayal, his bond with Lori remained strong. She was the best of both of them, his determination combined with a warmth and integrity that Paulette had lost long ago. "Where's Mom?" Lori asked, scanning the lobby. "Getting ready, I'm sure. You know how she likes to make an entrance." Lori smiled, but Matt caught something uncertain in her eyes. "Dad, is everything okay? Between you and Mom? I mean, you've both seemed different lately." Matt considered his words carefully. Lori would learn the truth soon enough, but not today. Today is about you and Derek. Everything else can wait. The ceremony went off without a hitch. Matt walked Lori down the aisle, her hand warm and steady on his arm. The officiant spoke about love and commitment and the sacred trust between husband and wife. Matt tried not to think about how those same words had once applied to him and Paulette. As they reached the altar, Matt caught sight of his ex-wife in the third row. She looked stunning as always, but there was something brittle about her composure, like fine china with hairline cracks. The reception was everything Lori had dreamed of. The Spanish ballroom glittered with crystal and candlelight. The band played old standards that made the older guests nostalgic, and a younger crowd danced to contemporary hits. Matt gave his father of the bride speech, focusing on Derek Coleman's character and his daughter's happiness, carefully avoiding any mention of marriage being eternal or unbreakable. It was nearly 9 o'clock when Colin Watson appeared at Matt's table. "Sir," he said quietly, "we have a situation." Matt followed Colin to a quiet corner near the bar. Through the tall windows, they could see the hotel's entrance portico, where two figures stood under the bright lights. Wesley Massey and his wife, Paulette's parents, were having what appeared to be an intense conversation with the hotel's doorman. "They're not on the guest list," Colin explained. "Haven't been for 2 weeks, not since the truth came out about Paulette's affair. But they're claiming there's been some mistake." Matt watched his former in-laws gesturing animatedly at the doorman, who was consulting his tablet with professional politeness. Behind them, a taxi waited with its engine running. "They probably came to confront me," Matt said, "or to make some kind of scene about Paulette's treatment. What do you want me to do?" Matt considered. The Masseys had always looked down on him, had always made it clear that they thought their daughter was slumming by marrying a blue-collar nobody. Now, they were discovering what happened when that nobody grew up to be more successful than they'd ever imagined. "Nothing," Matt said finally. "Let them stand there. Let them realize that their name doesn't mean what it used to." As they watched, Paulette herself appeared from a taxi behind her parents. She was clearly agitated, probably called by her mother when they couldn't get inside. The three of them huddled together near the entrance, a family conference in the Seattle rain. Matt felt a presence beside him and turned to see Lori, her face pale with concern. "Dad, what's happening? Why aren't Grandma and Grandpa coming in?" This was the moment Matt had dreaded. The moment when his daughter would have to choose between the illusion of family unity and the reality of what that family had become. "Because they're not on the guest list, sweetheart." "But why not? They RSVP'd months ago." Matt looked at his daughter's confused face, then back at the three figures standing helplessly in the rain. Paulette was now approaching the doorman herself, probably trying to use her charm to gain entry. "Because some people," Matt said quietly, "forfeit their right to be part of important moments when they betray the trust of the people who love them." Lori followed his gaze and saw her mother being politely but firmly turned away by the hotel staff. Understanding began to dawn in her eyes. "Dad," she whispered, "what's going on?" "Something that should have happened a long time ago," Matt replied. Through the window, they watched Paulette turn away from the entrance and walk back to her parents, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The three of them stood there for another moment, looking up at the golden light spilling from the ballroom windows, before getting back into their respective taxis and disappearing into the Seattle night. "I said nothing and walked away," Matt murmured, remembering his own words from that confrontation weeks ago. "What?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Come on, let's get back to your party." But as they walked back toward the dancing and laughter, Matt felt a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. The first phase of his revenge was complete. Tomorrow, the real reckoning would begin. Chapter 6. The Reckoning Begins. The morning after the wedding, Matt's phone rang at 6 a.m. He was already awake, having spent the night reading through legal documents in his study. After 3 decades of early morning construction sites, he never lost the habit of rising before dawn. "Mr. Allen?" The voice was unfamiliar, shaky. "This is Wesley Massey." Matt set down his coffee cup. "Wesley, to what do I owe the unexpected pleasure?" "We need to talk. About Paulette. About everything." "Do we?" "Please, Matt. I know we've had our differences, but she's still my daughter. She's in real trouble." Matt could hear the desperation in the older man's voice. The same Wesley Massey who'd spent 25 years making subtle digs about Matt's background, who'd never missed an opportunity to remind him that he'd married above his station. "What kind of trouble?" "The house is gone. The bank foreclosed this morning. They've frozen all her accounts, claiming she's under investigation for, I don't even understand it all. Tax evasion, fraud, something about moving assets illegally." Matt smiled. Paul Cross had done his work well. When Paulette had attempted to hide community property in preparation for the divorce, she'd unknowingly committed several federal crimes. The IRS investigation was legitimate, triggered by her suspicious financial activities. "That sounds serious," Matt said, injecting just the right amount of concern into his voice. "She has nowhere to go. She called us this morning, crying, begging us to help. But Matt, we can't. The lawyers say we could be implicated if we provide material support while she's under investigation." "I see. She needs help. Legal representation, somewhere to stay, money for basic expenses. We hoped. You hoped I might help her?" There was a long pause. "You were married for 25 years. Despite everything that's happened, surely you can't want to see her homeless." Matt stood and walked to his window, looking out at the perfectly manicured grounds of his estate. In the distance, he could see the space where Paulette's rose garden had once bloomed. He'd had it torn out and replaced with a putting green. "Wesley," he said finally, "let me tell you a story. When I was building my first development, I had a partner who tried to steal the project out from under me. He forged documents, bribed city officials, did everything he could to destroy me and take what I'd worked for. Matt, I don't see what. I didn't just beat him in court. I made sure he could never work in construction again. I had his contractor's license revoked, his business partnerships dissolved, his reputation so thoroughly destroyed that he couldn't get a job mixing concrete for minimum wage." Wesley was quiet now. "The lesson," Matt continued, "is that there are consequences for betrayal. Your daughter spent 25 years living off my success while treating me like some kind of charity case she'd graciously lifted up. Then she decided to steal half of everything I'd built and run off with a con artist. She made mistakes. She made choices." Matt's voice hardened. "And now she gets to live with the consequences of those choices. Just like her little boyfriend did when he found himself bankrupt and beaten in a Las Vegas alley." "Jesus Christ, Matt. What have you done? What I should have done years ago. I've stopped being the grateful nobody who was lucky enough to marry a Massey." Matt walked back to his desk, where the divorce papers lay waiting for his signature. "Your daughter wanted to find out what happens when you betray a self-made man. Now she knows. She has nothing left. Then she should have thought of that before she threw away everything she did have." Wesley's voice cracked. "What are we supposed to tell her?" Matt considered the question. In the distance, he could hear the sound of his landscaping crew arriving to work on the grounds. Life moving forward, productive and profitable. "Tell her," he said slowly, "that if she needs help, she should ask someone on her guest list." He hung up before Wesley could respond. An hour later, as Matt was reviewing construction reports in his study, Colin Watson called. "She's been trying to reach you," Colin reported. 12 calls to your cell phone, 6 to your office, 3 to the main house line. She's also sent 14 text messages. Let me guess. Begging for mercy. More like demanding it. Threatening to tell everyone what kind of man you really are, claiming you've orchestrated some kind of conspiracy against her." Matt laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "And what kind of man am I, Colin? The kind who keeps his word. The kind who rewards loyalty and punishes betrayal. The kind who builds things instead of just taking them." "Exactly." Matt signed the last of the divorce papers with a flourish. "What's the status on the investigation?" The IRS is very interested in her financial activities over the past 2 years. Moving money to offshore accounts, claiming false business expenses, failing to report gifts to her boyfriend. They're calling it a complex tax evasion scheme. How long? If she's convicted on all charges, 5 to 7 years plus restitution. But here's the beautiful part. She can't afford a decent lawyer. The public defender's office is overwhelmed, and the private attorneys want six-figure retainers up front. Matt nodded. And her new living situation? Motel 6 on Aurora Avenue. Paid for with a credit card that's maxed out. She's got maybe 3 days before that runs out. Aurora Avenue. The strip of cheap motels, pawn shops, and fast food restaurants that served as Seattle's unofficial Skid Row. Matt had driven past it countless times over the years, never imagining that Paulette Tate Massey Allen would ever see it as anything more than an eyesore to be avoided. Keep watching her, Matt said. I want to know when she hits rock bottom. Will do. Oh, and Matt? Derek Coleman called. He and Lori want to take you to dinner tonight. Apparently, Lori has some questions about what happened at the wedding. Matt closed his eyes. The hardest part of this whole ordeal would be explaining to his daughter why her mother was no longer part of their lives. Lori still believed in forgiveness, in second chances, in the fundamental goodness of people. She would learn. Everyone learned. Eventually. Tell them I'll pick them up at 7, Matt said. And Colin? Make sure Paulette knows I'll be at Camless tonight. Let her decide if she wants to make a scene in front of our daughter. Because if Paulette thought this was over, if she thought hitting rock bottom meant she'd reached the end of Matt's revenge, she was about to discover how wrong she could be. The real punishment was just beginning. Chapter 7. The Trap Closes. Paulette stood outside Camless Restaurant in the drizzling Seattle rain, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as her family, her former family, shared dinner and laughter inside. Matt sat at their usual table overlooking Lake Union, the one they'd reserved for special occasions throughout their marriage. Lori glowed with newlywed happiness, gesturing animatedly as she told some story. Derek Coleman listened with the patient smile of a man deeply in love. It was exactly the kind of scene Paulette had once taken for granted. Now, watching from the outside in her day-old clothes and scuffed shoes, it felt like observing life on another planet. Her phone buzzed. Another call from a blocked number, probably another debt collector or process server. She'd stopped answering unknown calls 2 days ago, after the third lawyer informed her that Matt's legal team had frozen every asset she'd ever touched, claimed, or even looked at sideways. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent 8 months planning to leave Matt and take half of everything. Instead, she was left with nothing while he sat inside an expensive restaurant, probably discussing business deals worth more than she'd see in a lifetime. A black sedan pulled up to the curb beside her. The rear window rolled down, revealing the weathered face of Colin Watson. Mrs. Allen, he said, though she was technically Mrs. Massey again now that the divorce was final. Get in. I'm not going anywhere with you. You are if you ever want to see your children again. Paulette's hand moved instinctively toward the restaurant's entrance, then stopped. Through the window, she could see Matt saying something that made Lori laugh. Neither of them looked toward the street. Neither seemed to notice or care that she was standing in the rain like some kind of beggar. She got in the car. Colin didn't speak until they were several blocks away from the restaurant. When he finally broke the silence, his voice was conversational, almost friendly. Motel 6 on Aurora. That's quite a step down from Bellevue, isn't it? What do you want? To deliver a message from Mr. Allen. Colin handed her a manila envelope, and to offer you one final choice. Paulette opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single airline ticket to Phoenix, dated for the following morning, and a cashier's check for $10,000. What's this? Your exit strategy. Same deal we offered your boyfriend, though considerably less generous. Paulette stared at the ticket. He wants me to leave Seattle. He wants you to disappear. Permanently. Take the money, get on the plane, and start over somewhere else. Somewhere far from here, where you can't embarrass his children or interfere with their lives. And if I don't? Colin's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the car seemed to drop 10 degrees. Then tomorrow morning, the IRS investigation becomes public. Every newspaper in the city gets a press release about the tax evasion charges. Your photograph, the unflattering one from your arrest, goes viral on social media, along with a detailed account of how you stole money from your husband to fund an affair with a known con artist. Paulette felt her stomach clench. You can't do that. We could do anything we want. You have no friends left, no family willing to defend you, no resources to fight back. You're a middle-aged woman with no job skills, no income, and a federal investigation hanging over your head. The car turned down a side street, heading back toward the cheap motel that had become Paulette's temporary home. Through the windshield, she could see the neon sign flickering, weekly rates available. The choice is simple, Colin continued. Take Mr. Allen's generous offer and start fresh somewhere else, or stay here and face the full consequences of your actions. But understand this, if you try to contact your children or cause any kind of trouble for Mr. Allen, the gloves come off completely. What does that mean? Colin pulled into the motel parking lot and put the car in park. It means you'll discover that tax evasion is just the beginning of what we can prove you did. Identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy. By the time we're finished, you'll be lucky to see daylight before you're 70. Paulette looked at the ticket in her hands, then at the shabby motel that represented everything her life had become. What about my children? When will I see them again? That depends entirely on them, and on whether you're smart enough to take this deal. Colin reached across her and opened the passenger door. The ticket expires at midnight tomorrow. Miss that flight, and you'll never get another chance to walk away clean. Paulette climbed out of the car on unsteady legs. Colin, she called as he prepared to drive away. Yes. Why is he doing this? I know I hurt him, but this is destroying my entire life. Colin studied her for a long moment. Mrs. Massey, he said finally, you spent 25 years treating a good man like he was lucky to have you, like you should be grateful for whatever scraps of affection you bothered to throw his way. You took his success for granted, spent his money like it was owed to you, and then tried to steal half of everything when you decided to trade him in for a younger model. The car's engine rumbled in the evening quiet. Mr. Allen isn't destroying your life, Colin continued. He's simply stopping the destruction of his own. The fact that you can't tell the difference says everything anyone needs to know about the kind of person you really are. He drove away, leaving Paulette standing alone in the parking lot of a cheap motel, clutching a plane ticket to nowhere and finally understanding the difference between consequences and revenge. Inside her pocket, her phone buzzed with another blocked call. This time, she answered. Paulette. The voice was young, female, unfamiliar. This is Jamie McKay from Channel 7 News. We're doing a story about tax evasion in wealthy Seattle families, and we'd love to get your comment. Paulette hung up and looked at the ticket again. Phoenix, a city where no one knew her name, where she could blend into the anonymous masses of people who'd lost everything and were trying to start over. Tomorrow at midnight, the plane would leave with or without her. The only question was whether she was finally smart enough to get on it. Chapter 8, The Final Gambit. Paulette didn't take the flight. Matt learned this the next evening from Colin, who called with a mixture of admiration and concern in his voice. She's hired a lawyer, Colin reported. Marcus Webb, some ambulance chaser who works out of a strip mall in Renton. Apparently, she's convinced him that she has grounds for a wrongful divorce suit. Matt was in his study, reviewing plans for a new waterfront development that would add another $50 million to his net worth. He set the blueprints aside and leaned back in his leather chair. On what grounds? Entrapment, fraud, conspiracy to commit financial crimes. She's claiming you orchestrated everything, from her affair to the tax investigation, as part of some elaborate scheme to steal her rightful share of the marital assets. Matt laughed, a sound that had grown colder over the past months. And what does this Marcus Webb think he can accomplish? He's filed for an emergency injunction to freeze all divorce proceedings pending a full investigation. He's also demanding access to your financial records, claiming there's evidence of hidden assets and illegal manipulation of community property. Interesting strategy. Matt stood and walked to his window, where he could see the lights of downtown Seattle twinkling in the distance. What kind of evidence does he claim to have? That's where it gets problematic. She's apparently recorded some conversations. Phone calls where she discussed the affair, meetings where money was exchanged. Webb thinks he can use these to prove that the whole thing was a setup. Matt felt a flicker of genuine surprise. In all his planning, he'd never considered that Paulette might be smart enough to document her own crimes. How much does she have? We don't know yet, but she's scheduled to give a deposition next week, and Webb is making noise about going to the media if the injunction is denied. For the first time in months, Matt felt a momentary uncertainty. Not fear, he'd faced worse challenges building his empire, but a recognition that Paulette might have one last card to play. Set up a meeting, he said finally. Tomorrow night. Somewhere private. With Webb. With Paulette. It's time we had a direct conversation about how this ends. The next evening, Matt sat in the back booth of a dive bar in Georgetown, nursing a beer and waiting. The choice of venue was deliberate, neutral ground, away from the upscale establishments where they might be recognized, but public enough to prevent any accusations of intimidation. Paulette arrived 20 minutes late, looking like a shadow of her former self. Her once perfect hair hung limp and unwashed. Her expensive clothes had been replaced by discount store alternatives, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant stress. She slid into the booth across from him without speaking, clutching a worn purse like a lifeline. "You look terrible," Matt said without preamble. "And you look exactly the same." Her voice was hoarse, probably from smoking, a habit she'd picked up since the divorce. Still playing the successful businessman while your ex-wife lives in squalor. Still playing the victim while ignoring your own choices. Matt took a sip of his beer. "Colin tells me you think you have some kind of case against me. I know what you did, Matt. All of it. The surveillance, the manipulation, the way you orchestrated everything to make me look like the villain. You didn't need my help for that." Paulette's hand shook as she lit a cigarette. "I recorded conversations. Phone calls with Derek, meetings with lawyers, even some of our own arguments. Everything that proves you set this up from the beginning." "Assuming that's true," Matt said calmly, "what exactly do you think you can prove? That you manipulated me into the affair. That you knew about Derek's background and chose not to warn me. That you deliberately allowed me to commit crimes so you could use them against me later." Matt nodded thoughtfully. "It's an interesting theory. Creative, even. But it has one fatal flaw, which is, it assumes I forced you to betray our marriage." Matt leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Tell me, Paulette, in any of these recordings, is there evidence of me forcing you to sleep with Derek Reeves? Any proof that I made you steal money from our accounts to fund his lifestyle? Any indication that I compelled you to sign lease agreements for secret apartments in Arizona?" Paulette's cigarette trembled between her fingers. "Because here's what I think happened," Matt continued. "I think you got bored with being married to a man who worked for a living. I think you decided you deserved something more exciting, more romantic, more worthy of your refined sensibilities. And I think you convinced yourself that since you'd marry beneath your station, you were entitled to whatever you could take when you left. That's not. The only thing I'm guilty of," Matt said, "is finally giving you what you wanted. You spent 25 years making it clear that you thought you were too good for me. Now you get to find out what your life looks like without me in it." Paulette stubbed out her cigarette with more force than necessary. "The injunction will freeze everything. You won't be able to touch any of the assets until this is resolved." "Will it?" Matt smiled, the same cold expression that had become his default over the past months. "Because I seem to recall that all of my assets are held in trust, controlled by a board of directors that includes some very prominent Seattle businessmen. Men who've known me for decades, who've seen me build something from nothing, who understand the value of loyalty and hard work." Understanding began to dawn in Paulette's eyes. "You think Paul Cross is the only lawyer in this city who owes me favors?" Matt continued. "You think the judges who approve my development permits over the years don't remember who helped build their campaign war chests? You're about to learn the difference between having money and having power." Paulette's face had gone pale. "You can't just—" "I can do whatever I want," Matt interrupted, "because I earned it. Every connection, every favor, every alliance. I built them through 30 years of keeping my word and delivering on my promises. You built nothing except a reputation for looking pretty at charity galas. He stood to leave, dropping a 20 on the table for his beer. The offer still stands, he said. $10,000 and a one-way ticket out of Seattle. After tomorrow, that offer expires permanently. And if I stay? If I fight this? Matt looked down at her. This woman who'd once seemed so far above his station, now reduced to making threats from the booth of a dive bar. Then you'll discover that I'm not just ruthless when it comes to business, he said. I'm thorough and patient, and I never, ever forget. He walked away, leaving Paulette sitting alone with her cigarettes and her fading hopes of revenge. Behind him, he heard her phone ring. Probably Marcus Webb, calling to discuss strategy for a case that would never see the inside of a courtroom. By tomorrow, even that small comfort would be gone. Chapter 9. The Guest List. The final blow came not through lawyers or investigators, but through Lori. Matt's daughter called him 3 days later, her voice heavy with a sadness that cut through his carefully constructed emotional armor. Dad, we need to talk. About Mom. They met at the house. Matt's house now, legally and completely, in the same study where he'd first learned about Paulette's betrayal. Lori sat in the chair where her mother had once pretended to read while actually planning her escape, and the irony wasn't lost on either of them. She came to see me yesterday, Lori said without preamble. At my office. She looked broken, Dad. Really broken. Matt poured himself a bourbon and offered one to Lori, who shook her head. What did she want? She begged me to talk to you, to ask you to stop whatever you're doing to her. Lori's voice cracked slightly. She said she's been living in her car for the past week because she can't afford even the cheapest motel. And what did you tell her? I told her I'd talk to you, that maybe we could work something out, some kind of arrangement where she could have a little money, a small apartment, something basic to live on. Matt studied his daughter's face. Even now, even knowing what Paulette had done, Lori still believed in forgiveness, in second chances, in the fundamental possibility of redemption. And what do you think I should do? Lori was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. I think you should help her. Not because she deserves it, but because you're better than this. Because the man who raised me wouldn't destroy someone completely, no matter what they'd done. Matt felt something twist in his chest. Not guilt, exactly, but a recognition of what his revenge had cost him beyond money or time. His daughter was looking at him like she didn't recognize the man he'd become. She betrayed everything we built together, he said quietly. 25 years of marriage, our family, the trust between us. She threw it all away for a con artist who saw her as nothing more than a mark. I know that, Dad, but she's still my mother, and she's still the woman you loved once, before everything went wrong. Matt walked to the window, looking out at the space where Paulette's rose garden had once bloomed. In the distance, he could see construction crews working on his latest development, another addition to the empire he'd built through sheer force of will and refusal to accept defeat. Do you know what she said to me the day I filed for divorce? He asked. Lori shook her head. She said I should be grateful, that she'd wasted the best years of her life married to a man who could never give her the life she deserved. She actually used the word wasted. The room fell silent, except for the distant sound of construction equipment. That night, I made myself a promise, Matt continued. I promised that Paulette would learn exactly what her life was worth without the man she'd wasted it on. I promised that everyone who'd ever treated me like I should be grateful for their scraps would understand who they'd really been dealing with. And now, have you proved whatever you needed to prove? Matt turned back to his daughter, seeing his own eyes staring back at him from her face. What would you have me do? Let her go. Really let her go. Give her enough money to start over somewhere else, and then move on with your life. Like Derek Reeves? Just let her walk away clean after destroying everything we built. Like a man who's strong enough to win without having to destroy his opponent completely. Matt drained his bourbon and set the glass down with a soft clink. In the silence that followed, he could hear his phone buzzing. Probably another call from Paul Cross or Colin Watson, updating him on some new aspect of Paulette's legal troubles. He didn't answer it. She came to the wedding, he said finally. Did you know that? Stood outside in the rain like some kind of beggar, trying to get into her own daughter's wedding reception. I know. I saw her. And you know what I told her parents when they called? begging me to help her? Lori nodded. Ask someone on your guest list. That's right. Matt walked to his desk and pulled out a checkbook, an old-fashioned paper one he kept for personal expenses. And do you know what I realized yesterday when I was going through the final divorce papers? What? The guest list was my choice. Every name on it, every person who got to be part of that celebration. I chose who belonged and who didn't. He wrote out a check and tore it from the book. But I also get to choose who belongs on the guest list for the rest of my life. He handed the check to Lori, who looked at it and gasped. It was made out to Paulette for $50,000, enough for a fresh start, a small apartment, basic transportation. What's the catch? Lori asked. No catch. She takes the money and leaves Seattle. Permanently. No contact with you or Derek. No attempts to interfere in our lives. No more legal challenges or media interviews. She disappears completely, and we never speak of her again. And if she doesn't agree? Matt's expression hardened back into the cold mask it had become over the past months. Then she'll learn that this was her last chance to walk away with anything at all. Lori stared at the check, then at her father. Why are you doing this? Really? Because you asked me to. Because you're my daughter, and you still believe your old man is capable of mercy. Matt sat down across from her. And because I want you to remember me as the man who was strong enough to end this on his own terms, not as someone who was consumed by his own revenge. What about forgiveness? I'll never forgive her, Lori. I'll never forgive anyone who betrays me like that. But I can choose to stop caring about her enough to keep punishing her. Lori folded the check carefully and put it in her purse. I'll make sure she gets this. And I'll make sure she understands the terms. Good. As Lori prepared to leave, she paused at the study door. Dad, for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. And if she comes back, if she tries to contact you or cause trouble, then she'll learn that the guest list is permanent, Matt replied. And there are no second chances for people who abuse my generosity. After Lori left, Matt sat alone in his study, surrounded by the blueprints and contracts that represented his life's work. Outside, the Seattle skyline glittered with lights from buildings he'd helped construct, from developments that bore his mark on the city's landscape. Tomorrow, Paulette would